you can certainly partner with other partners and buy a property together and raise
Mm.
capital together, and it's perfectly fine. But as you know, you all need to be active partners. And as
Yeah.
you also know, many times people put these things together. Not everybody's an active partner. Some people are just
Mm.
coming into the deal just to raise capital, and then they don't have anything to do with the operations or the decision making or anything like that. And that's where you get yourself into trouble with the SEC and the state commissions.
Are you looking to achieve massive success in your life without dealing with costly investment nightmares? If yes, then this is the podcast for you. Here, we provide engineers and busy professionals all the secrets and strategies to create multiple streams of income, build generational wealth, and live a meaningful life by design. Here's your host, Ted Patel.
Welcome back to another episode of Decoding Cash Flow Podcast. And today we have a very special guest, Seth Bradley, who is a securities attorney and a real estate syndicator. He's a chief legal officer at Tribevest and a managing partner at RaiseLaw and Law Capital Partners. Seth is also a host of Passive Income Attorney podcast, and today we'll like to, get his perspective on, as an attorney, I would say, on the different ways to raise capitals, and what to look into or where to be careful while raising capital, etc. So we'll dive deep into those aspects as well as touch base upon the pros and cons of passive income. So, Seth, welcome to Decoding Cash Flow. It's a pleasure having you on the show.
Absolutely, Ted. Really appreciate you having me on, man. Looking forward to it.
All right, great. So, Seth, before we dive deep into your niche, can you give our listeners a little bit background about yourself? What do you do, and how did you get started in the real estate?
For sure, man. I'll give you the expedited version, but I grew up in West Virginia, grew up blue collar. My dad was a coal miner. He's a retired coal miner. My mom's a retired school teacher. So, I didn't come from an entrepreneurship or a real estate background, blue collar background. And, that kind of sent me into a path of, full-time W-2 and trying to figure out what the best job I can get, because I didn't really think of, entrepreneurship and owning assets and things like that were really an option. So I went into med school, hated it. I went for about a year and a half, dropped out on my own volition, ended up actually getting my MBA after that, and then into law school, where I really started to thrive. I really liked law school a lot. I liked, I never wanted to litigate, but I was always
Mhm.
interested in business and transactions and real estate and those sorts of things. So getting that legal background gave me kind of that really solid foundation to, honestly, at a young age, getting myself into doors where I probably didn't belong. When you say you're an attorney, you're a real estate attorney, you're a securities attorney. When you're younger, it's like, oh, really? That's really cool. And you kind of, you get your foot in the door. So that's really how I got started. I worked in big law for about almost 7 years.
Mhm.
Worked at most recently one of the top three law firms in the world. It was a great experience. It gave me a really good background and foundation on securities law and kind of that highest level of sophistication and transactions.
Mhm.
And allowed me to save a little bit of money and really kind of start going out on my own and start purchasing real estate and start investing in syndications passively and then actively, and then eventually start my own firm, my own boutique securities law firm.
That's awesome, man. Love it. So, a lot of people, they start their investment journey by maybe at the initial level, they buy a small multifamily or do a fix and flip. You know, uh, how how did you manage to get into syndication directly, or what was the path that you took? What inspired you to get into syndication directly while being an attorney, instead of going through the normal route of starting small and then getting into multifamily syndication?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, Ted, I took the traditional route, man. I started, like a lot of people do. I started really small. I started listening to
Okay.
Bigger Pockets, right? You listen to Bigger
Okay.
Pockets, you start
Yeah.
thinking, oh, I've got to own rental property. So, as soon as I got my first big law firm job, I actually house hacked into a duplex, lived in one
Okay.
half. My wife was flexible enough with me to be able to do that, so she didn't mind living in a duplex and living in one half, renting the other half out, and having them pay the mortgage. And that was kind of the beginning. And then I just started, like a lot of people, doing fix and flips and doing fix and buy and holds and wholesaling a little bit here and there, and then moving your way up to, small multifamily. And then
Mhm.
as I got more sophisticated as an investor and more sophisticated as an attorney, and started looking at the clients that I have, because I'm working at big law firms, and
Mhm.
these clients are the folks like us now, right? Like they're taking down $20 million properties, $100 million funds, things like that. And you just start thinking, man, I'm not thinking big enough. I need to go bigger. How do I do that? Having that attorney background in real
Mhm.
estate securities really helped me out. But I was still kind of, a little bit hesitant. I didn't really know that side of the business. I knew the legal side, I knew the closing side, but I didn't know the business side. So I started investing passively first. And that was after I
Mhm.
spoke to some people, and they said that's probably the best thing to do. I had a good job, so I was able to afford it. So I invested passively in some deals, kind of got my feet wet that way, started to understand from, the investor standpoint, what that looked like to invest in a syndication or a fund. And then at that point, I realized, hey, I can do this. So I actually started leveraging my securities background, to partner with other operators, and get an equity position in the company. Bringing in investors, doing the due diligence, doing the some of the underwriting, and then also bringing my securities skills to the table, which everybody needs when they're raising capital.
Okay, all right, that sounds great, man. So, so you did take a traditional route, as you mentioned, right? You start
Yep.
maybe didn't stay in that uh, uh, field for quite a long time. You just jumped to syndication
Yeah, pretty
after
quick,
house
man.
hacking. Yeah, pretty quick.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah. I
that's
mean, I
good.
built a small portfolio, and like I said, went into some smaller multifamilies. Maybe took about 3 or 4 years, and I started investing passively. And then, by the time I started investing passively, I was already looking to go to the active side within, a couple of months.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Are you still an attorney? Do you still practice law?
I do, kind of as a, it's not like a full-time gig, but I do
Mhm.
have my own boutique law firm, RaiseLaw, where,
Okay.
if it's down the middle, I'll take on the work.
Okay.
If it's a real estate syndication, if it's a real estate fund or it's a fund of fund, I put those together for people. I've been
Okay.
doing that for, over a decade now. So it's like breaking sticks at this point, but I've really been able to leverage my securities attorney background to some of these other positions with startups. So
Mhm.
startups are really exciting for me. Those are home run swings, right? Like real estate
Yeah.
is kind of like singles. Like let's hit singles, let's keep that batting average high.
Yeah.
These are a little bit safer, they're secure. When you get into the startup world, it's like your chance of failure is pretty high. Whereas real estate,
Mhm.
your chance of failure is on the low side. But with startups, it's pretty high. But that kind of appeases my risk appetite,
Yeah.
to get involved with these startups. And I've been able to like I said, leverage my security skills and my background as a syndicator and a fund manager, to become chief legal officer for Tribevest. So
Mhm.
Tribevest, traditionally was a group investing platform. And I was speaking at a conference in the BVI's with Travis Smith, who is the CEO. And we really just hit it off, and our wives hit it off. And they were trying to pivot from this group investing platform to try to enter the securities and the syndication market. And they were looking at like a co-GP model. And I said, look, Travis, this is going to fund of funds, right? Like, this was about a year and a half ago. Some things were going on in the background with the SEC, doing some investigations and things like that for some well-known folks. And the market was starting to see, hey, we need to start paying more attention to these securities regulations and maybe get away from the co-GP model. And the solution all along has always been fund of funds. It's just fund of
Yeah.
funds is expensive. It's hard to put together. It's, all those different things. But what we've done at Tribevest is be able to kind of package that into a fund of fund in a box.
All right. Yeah, we'll speak get more into that fund of fund models, but before we dive deep into that, I just wanted to check few things. Like you mentioned uh, startups. So in addition to the real estate, you also do raise capital for the startups. Is that so?
So I'm not raising capital for the startups. I'm actually fractional CLO for
Okay.
not only Tribevest, but two other startups. One called
Okay.
Clavis, which is also a real estate technology software platform.
Okay.
And then Stack Rack Battery, which is a battery manufacturing company. So think, Tesla Powerwall. It's similar to that. It's actually a newer technology that we use, a more powerful technology, but it's very similar in nature where you pair that with solar. So we're a solar manufacturing or a battery manufacturing company. And again, these are, I would call them somewhat mature startups in that world. I mean, we're well over 1.5 million in revenue of a stack rack, and we just went live with a fully automated software with Clavis, and then Tribevest is really headed towards Series A right now. So all three of them are progressing really well, and looking forward to seeing how I can help ignite that.
Okay. Sounds good, man. All right. So now moving on to this Trivest, right? Tell me something about a little bit more about what you do at Trivest. Like you said, you have a fund in the box model.
Yeah.
Now, uh, so any group of investors, they can come together, create their own fund, and they can invest in operators fund. Is that though how it works with Trivest?
Yeah, to a certain extent. I mean, I think it helps to think about kind of the history of group investing. So
Mm-hmm.
traditionally, Trivest did what they called group investing, and it's more similar to what you described. Let's say me, you, and three buddies put in $100,000, and we've got $500,000 now to get over maybe an investment minimum to invest in a syndication or a fund. And that's it. So we leveraged each other's capital to get into a deal at maybe a large minimum, or maybe that we got better financial terms because we put together 500,000 instead of investing $50,000 or something. The issue there is no one gets paid, right? Like we're all just putting our money together, investing together, and it's really set up like a joint venture. We all have equal voting rights based on how much money we put in. We make decisions together. We all decided to invest in that one deal, and we could all decide together to invest in a different deal if we actually want to. But nobody's getting paid. Because when you start getting paid, now you're talking about securities laws. When you start getting paid, you should be licensed or find an exemption. So, you need a broker's dealer's license or be an RIA under certain circumstances. So that's where you start getting into that. A lot more complicated when that starts to happen. And that's what Tribevest pivoted to last year is, hey, we still have the group investing option, but a lot of times what happens is one of those people in the group is the one doing all the work, right? Like one of the person is the one that found Tribevest and is like, hey, I found this platform. Let's all put our money together. And then, he's the one collecting the money and badgering people to, do the distributions and do the taxes and all those sorts of things. There's somebody putting in some time and effort for that. And at some point they're like, hey, if I do this next time, like I want to get paid for it, but how can I do that? You have to find the right capital raising vehicle to be able to legally pay yourself. And we've created that with Tribevest, and that kind of coincided with what I mentioned earlier, which was kind of the industry pivot away from the co-GP model. When I say co-GP model, I mean the abuse of the co-GP model. You can certainly partner with other partners and buy a property together and raise capital together, and it's perfectly fine. But as you know, you all need to be active partners. And as you also know, many times people put these things together. Not everybody's an active partner. Some people are just coming into the deal just to raise capital, and then they don't have anything to do with the operations or the decision making or anything like that. And that's where you get yourself into trouble with the SEC and the state commissions. And the solution to that is well, first of all, just don't do it. But the solution to it, if you still want to raise capital, is to create a fund of funds. But the problem with the fund of funds model is now these former co-GPs have all these new responsibilities. They have to find a securities attorney. They have to put together offering documents. They have to find a CPA. They have to start a business. They have to get a business banking account. They have to manage their investors. They have to find a portal. They have to do all the things that a real active GP would normally have to do. But typically, the active partner is the one doing it for them. Now they have to do it all themselves. So it's a lot more work.
Mm-hmm. So in short, as you mentioned, right, co-GPs, they need to be active in the syndication if you're a co-GP in any of the property, you need to be active. And I've also seen, and you might have also seen, there are certain projects where there are 10 or 15 different co-GPs,
Right.
and only 5 or 6 takes responsibilities. Other are just raising fund for that
Yep.
particular property. So this helps. This model, helps the inactive coaching, I would say, partners to get the fees that they need, as well as raise capital without getting into crosshair of SEC.
That's right. That's right. And the only reason that it's been going on for so long now, and I'll say since like, let's say 2012, because that's when the Jobs Act passed and you were starting to be able to advertise for these syndication deals and things like that, is because real estate's been so fantastic, right? Like it's been going up, up, up since the crash in 2008. And nobody's suing anyone for the most part because their investments are great, right? Up until, let's say, that little blip in 2020 from COVID. But then last year, when the interest rates started going up, some of these projects started to fail. And that's when investors start getting angry because they're not getting, their distributions, and they start asking questions. And that's when you're seeing people, they're getting capital calls, and they're starting to, get sued by passive investors. That's when these things start to fall apart. Because if everybody's happy, there's nobody's going to get caught, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like nobody's going to find out that you raised capital illegally unless somebody's upset. And starting last year, that's when people started getting upset, and that's when you're starting to see some people get exposed for raising capital in the wrong way.
What are the fees that you can charge in this fund of fund model? What kind of fees? Because as a co-GP, there are many different venues, right? You can
Yep.
charge the finding fees, operations, management fees. At the end, you can also take a part of the profit. Uh, you know.
Yeah. So a lot of it comes down to how you structure it, right? Like these are very complicated securities regulations that have a lot of layers on top of them, because when you get into a fund of funds, you're not just dealing with what people are familiar with, 506C and 506B exemptions, which are the 1930s acts. You also get into the 1940s acts when you start dealing with fund of funds. And those are the Investment Advisor Act and the Investment Company Act. So there are lots of nuances to that and how you can get paid. But if you're structured correctly, you can get paid the same way. So you can get paid an upfront fee, you can get paid an ongoing annual fee percentage, and you can get paid a profit split. Like basically all the same types of fees that you would collect as a co-GP, you can also collect as a fund manager. But again, there's a lot of nuances to that.
Okay. All right. So for the new investors, right? When they start into this passive investment world, they are, they get a little intimidated by seeing all the different documents that the operator sends them, the PPMs and all the other legal documents, right? And so based on your perspective, like, you're an attorney, right? So what are the things that the investor needs to check in these legal documents to make sure there are no red flags, or to be cautious of something? What are those things that you like to tell to our listeners?
For sure. And it's tough, right? Like these are not short documents. I mean, the subscription booklet, so to speak, that includes, let's say, the subscription agreement, the operating agreement, and the PPM, it can be minimum 100 pages. It's probably going to be closer to 200 pages in totality. And that's intimidating. I mean, that's intimidating for myself, who's an attorney, let alone, a passive investor that says, hey, I thought I was just going to invest passively. Like this, reading a 200-page legal document is not passive to me. So you do need to be educated on kind of the things to look for. And, you should read the whole thing, unfortunately. I mean, you should at least skim it over. And the more you do it, the more you'll get comfortable with it. And the more when you see it the next time and the time after that, you'll be able to get through it quicker and quicker, because they all look, they all have the same basic parts. But I would say some things to look for. First of all, make sure that everything matches. So let's say we'll call it the offering memorandum or the pitch deck, that the marketing piece that the operator puts out. they're going to have their projected returns, their fees, the pro forma. They're going to have some other information in there. Make sure that those numbers match the numbers in the PPM. And the PPM is a disclosure document. So it's a legal document, but it's not the final legal document. The final legal document is going to be the operating agreement. So you really want to make sure that the marketing piece or the pitch deck matches the PPM, and the PPM matches what the operating agreement says. And ultimately, whatever the operating agreement says is what goes. So if you take the time to read anything, it should be the operating agreement, even though that will probably be the hardest document to read because it will be completely in legalese. But that's the controlling document. So if the pitch deck says something, and then the operating agreement says another thing, the operating agreement is what controls. So, some big things to look out for are voting rights. Typically as a passive investor, you're not going to have a lot of voting rights, but there should be some sort of a mechanism to remove the manager in very extreme circumstances. So if there's, some sort of gross negligence or fraud or misrepresentation or, things like that, then there should be a mechanism to remove the manager. And that's usually done through some sort of a majority vote or super majority vote, plus, proving that they did commit those actions. Again, it should be a pretty extreme case, but there should be a mechanism there for that. Obviously, make sure that you know what the fees are going to be. You need to know what fees you're paying. You need to know what that waterfall looks like, meaning you need to know how you're going to get paid as the passive investor. Make sure you understand that and make sure it matches your understanding. And if you have questions about it, make sure you ask the fund manager or ask the operator to explain it to you in non-legalese language so that you can understand it. And then on top of that, another important thing that you're seeing nowadays is capital calls. Make sure you know what the capital call language is. So if there's some sort of a demand for capital from the operator or from the fund manager, what triggers that? Is it mandatory? Is it discretionary? Is it up to a vote? It could be up to a vote. Just make sure you know the mechanism for that and that you're comfortable with it.
Yeah. And if your share gets diluted, if you don't contribute to the capital call, that's the other thing, right? Yeah.
That's right. And it's perfectly fine to get diluted if you don't contribute. I mean, that's typical. Yeah. Like if you don't contribute, you should get diluted, right? But what you need to look out for is if you get diluted pro rata, based on how much you didn't contribute, which is fine. And it's typical, but you'll see some penalty provisions where you get diluted even more so than pro rata, and that's where it can be a problem. So just look out for those types of provisions.
Yeah. Right. And in these documents, right, the legal documents, what if you take fund of fund model, if you take like a separate 506B or C, right, what are the extra documents in each of these sections that any person who wants to start raising capital needs to be aware of?
Yeah, so if you do a fund of fund, you just have to think of it like it's your own syndication, it's your own fund. So you're going to have your own separate set of offering documents or subscription booklet, whatever you want to call it. So there's going to be two sets. And looking at it from the passive investor standpoint, if you're the passive investor that's going to be investing in the fund of fund, there's going to be two sets of documents you're going to have to look at. You're going to look at the fund of fund documents, which is going to have the PPM, the operating agreement, and the subscription agreement. And then you're also going to have to look at the offering documents for the target deal that the fund of fund is investing in. So there's going to be two sets. So double the work. But there's some benefits to that. And obviously, if you're investing in a fund of fund, then you have a certain level of trust with that particular fund manager, which is, probably why you're investing with them anyways. And sometimes you can get a better deal. I mean, not all the time, but every once in a while you can. So there, you'll have to review two sets of offering documents, but at the end of the day, it's like I said, you'll get better and better at it as time goes by.
As a syndicator, what are the different assets that you are involved with? I know multifamily. Is there anything else that you do syndication for?
Yeah, I've done a lot of different things. Multifamily, I've done industrial, I've done retail shopping centers, RV parks, different funds. Right now, I'm actually doing a California ADU fund, so accessory dwelling units. So we're doing those in Riverside County. It's a $20 million fund. And we're buying single family houses and turning it into basically a 3 or 4 plex. And sometimes you
Mhm.
split the lot and you end up with 6 to 8 units on that thing, and they're incredible. It's really the only thing you can get done here in California,
Yeah.
with little resistance, because everybody knows California is the king of regulation. So, but for some reason, they think the ADUs are the solution for the housing crisis out here. So they let these things get permitted pretty quickly, and it's an excellent opportunity. It might be a short window, but right now it's a fantastic asset.
Mhm. All right. And so you only invest in California? You're only focused, or you look at the other properties around out of state also?
Oh, I look out of state for sure. This is actually the first thing that I've done outside of, a few single families and condos, in California. Generally, I was one of those people that always said, "Hey, you can't really invest in California. It doesn't cash flow. It never makes sense." I've actually came around quite a bit to that. Now that I'm
Hmm.
a more mature investor, and you're in New Jersey, so you see
Yeah.
like that big appreciation play as well. I just remember like Bigger Pockets used to be, they used to preach, oh, it's all about cash flow, right? Like,
Hmm.
all cash flow, don't invest for appreciation, but you need to invest for both. I mean, I think you need to invest for cash flow because you need to cover your bases. I mean, you don't want a negatively cash flowing asset, that's for sure.
Yeah.
You don't want something that's going to cost you money. But when you invest in places like New York and coastal California and, beach areas, things like that, city centers, over the long run, they're going to appreciate, and they're going to appreciate a lot. I mean, you might have, more of a up and down, but at the end of the day, it's going to be much higher. Whereas, when you invest in, which I invest in the Midwest, I invest in the South, those places are a little bit more, subtle, and they're going to increase in price as well and in appreciation, but it's just, it's a lot more slow, and you might get a little bit more cash flow. So, I like to have a good mix, but, if you're not strapped for cash, and you're really trying to build long-term wealth, that appreciation play is really important.
Absolutely. I can't agree with you more because it's all about numbers, right? First of all, yeah, you don't have to have a negative cash flow, as you mentioned. Uh, the other thing is, regardless of which state it is, like California, New Jersey, New York, of course, there are some landlord-friendly states, some are not, but as long as you know how to navigate those waters, you'll be fine.
For sure, for sure. And that,
Yeah.
and obviously forced appreciation in everything. I mean, I don't buy
Yeah.
anything that doesn't have some upside from rolling up your sleeves, for sure.
Mhm. Yeah. So now you are an attorney, securities attorney. Do you see in next few years? Do you see any changes, upcoming changes with regards to real estate syndication? Like there are some more rules or coming in.
I don't want to get political, but I do
Mhm.
think that politics have a pretty big influence on this. I vote for policy. I don't vote for the person. I vote for the
Mhm.
policy. And I'm in business, I'm in real estate, so I like to vote for people that are going to be favorable for me. So, this recently proposed massive capital gains taxes absolutely insane to me. So things like that really tough to judge, right? But like, if it, let's say it does go towards the Republican side, let's just say that it's known that they want less government oversight, including the SEC, because you've seen the SEC pick up in the last 4 years. With oversight, you've seen it, increased employees with the IRS, things like that. So that does influence things. Especially with the SEC, right? Because we're talking about syndications, we're talking about funds. It'll make people a little bit more trepid to do anything, right? If it's more of a free market and they're not too worried about the SEC, you're going to see more business. You're going to see more funds. You're going to see more syndications. Looming is the capital gains thing. That is huge. That will be massive for the real estate market, whichever way that goes. Now, even if it goes towards the left, it's not to say that those laws are going to pass. I mean, that's going to be a really difficult thing to pass anyways. But if it does, that can dramatically influence it. And there are other things that are out of our control as well. I mean, things like world wars, like things like that. you can't
which is out
predict,
of your
right?
control. Yeah.
You cannot predict those things. So you really you can't focus on politics. You can't focus on things that are out of control. You have to do what you can do to make yourself better and to better your business. But I see the securities, the securities industry, fund of funds, raising capital for real estate, those sorts of things. I can only see it going up. I mean, there even with some headwinds from different things, from different regulations or different things that are happening around the world. Just there's a massive there's a massive movement towards it. So I think it'll continue to go up over time.
Okay. All right. So before we get to the final round of questions, I had one topic that I want to touch base upon. You being a syndicator, if you'd like to give listeners a little bit overview on the strategies that you use to raise capital.
Sure, man. I actually have a really good perspective working at Tribevest now because we deal with so many different capital raisers and fund managers and lead sponsors, and we're getting to see who raises a lot of capital, who doesn't, who's able to perform, who can't. And you start to see the people that are successful and the people that are not. And trends that we're seeing are people that already have an existing network are usually successful out of the gate, right? Like if you're a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, maybe even a software engineer, someone like that already has a wealthy network. Those people are generally very successful at raising capital because they have wealthy friends, and it's easy for them to raise, $500,000, $1 million out of the gate. That's number one, but that only lasts for so long. I mean, number two, once you kind of exhaust those resources, you really need to focus on referrals from those people that invested with you, and hopefully you did a good job and you keep your communications up, which is really important too. I should say that keeping those investor communications are super important, and hardly anybody does it. You've got to communicate
once they invest with you, you got to follow up on regular basis.
That's right,
You got
man.
to provide them the reports.
You wouldn't believe it. I mean, you would think that would be one of the easiest things, but it's not, because everybody has shiny object syndrome. And as soon as you close a deal, you're moving on to the next one and you're not worried about those other investors. Well, that's your best source of new investors are your current ones for referrals, because if they give you a referral, that's golden. That's your easiest way. And then secondarily, you're going to have to figure out a way to get in front of strangers and new investors. So whatever that looks like, if that looks like going on other people's podcasts or starting your own podcast or speaking at events, or, if you're a doctor, start going to conferences and just talking about, what you're investing in and what you're doing and the deals you're doing, things like that. You've got to network, you've got to get out there, and you've got to figure out a way to get in front of new people and new potential investors.
Any specific tools or softwares you recommend?
Me personally, I just use ActiveCampaign for my CRM. I've seen a bunch of people use different ones. Go High Level is great as well because it's all in one. So you can create your emails, your funnels, your CRM, your courses if you have one. You can manage a mastermind on there. You can do it all on there. It doesn't do anything exceptional, but it does everything pretty good. So that's kind of the knock on it. But yeah, those are the two big ones that I use.
Same here. I'm also good. I'm also into ActiveCampaign.
Oh, cool. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's a good tool. Yeah. All right. So Seth, loving this conversation, but I also need to be mindful of your time. So I would like to move on to the final round of questions. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell to our listeners before we move to the final questions?
I would just say, I've seen this journey before. I know a lot of your listeners are passive investors. And a lot of times when I give a keynote, when I'm speaking, it's to passive investors. So, and I talk about the journey from passive investing to raising capital, because that's kind of the natural progression. It's like you invest passively for a while, then your friends ask you about that deal, and oh man, where do you find these investments? Blah, blah, blah. And eventually you're like, man, maybe I can raise some capital. But doing that transition from passive investor to capital raiser has never been easier, right? And especially with I'm going to plug Tribevest here because it's a done for you product. So when you have your 5 wealthy friends or your 10 wealthy friends that want to invest in a deal, but you want to figure out how you can actually get paid for it legally, Tribevest does all the stuff that I was talking about doing before. That's just a pain, like getting your CPA, getting a securities attorney, doing your offering documents, starting a business. We do all that for you. We onboard your investors. We do everything. I mean, it's a white glove service. So that didn't exist a few years ago. So it's easier than ever to make that transition from passive investor to raising capital for somebody like you, Ted.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. It's always good to see, like, people simplifying the things. Less time, less money, less energy to put in, and you get the same kind of returns. And uh, you know,
For sure.
so
For
all right,
sure.
yep. Let's move on to the final round questions. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
All right, pretty easy ones. Okay, so
All right,
all
man.
right.
I'll take your word for it. Better not stump me here.
All right. So, what are the main source of information? Main source of information to learn and grow.
I listen to a lot of podcasts. I do a lot of audio. If it's and especially like Audible for books and then podcasts, obviously for shorter content. And then if I think it's a really good Audible book, then I'll actually buy the hard copy and try to read it. I won't say that I always get to it because I just don't have time, but I like to
Mhm.
listen to stuff while I'm working out and running and doing stuff like that. But mainly podcasts to just stay up to date on things. And I've kind of actually gotten away from real estate specific podcasts and more into like business things like Alex Hormozy and those types of guys that talk about business generally. I think it's a good flavor to mix it up with.
Awesome. What is the one book that you recommend which had the most impact in your life or on your business?
Yeah, I mean, it's Rich Dad Poor Dad. I mean, that's for
Yeah.
sure. I'll say another one though, because I would say everybody probably says that. I mean, Rich Dad Poor Dad definitely had the most impact. I mean, I think it has that influence on a lot of people. When they read
Mhm.
that book, they're like, it's so simple, but it just flips the light and it just changes the
Yeah.
way that you look at kind of life generally. But I would say this one, it's a little fluey, but Miracle Equation by Hal Elrod,
Yeah.
who did the Miracle Morning. This one came after that, but it's great because it just the main line, which is unwavering faith plus extraordinary effort equals miracles. I mean, if you just I use that as a mantra because it's like, shit gets tough, right? Like, and you've got
Yeah.
to be consistent and you've got to do it over and over again. And when you're an entrepreneur or you're a business owner, or even if you're an investor and you're trying to get out of your W-2, your 9 to 5, like you don't know if it's going to have a happy ending. So you have to have unwavering faith. And if you do have that faith and you do keep putting in the consistent effort, it's going to work out in the end.
Yeah. Absolutely. I have read that book too. It's one of my favorite also. And all right. So, what is the one advice that you like to give to a listener? Any business or investment advice?
Yeah. Pay for help, pay for speed. You can sit here and figure it out yourself. You can go to YouTube University, you can go to ChatGPT, you can listen to all the podcasts and read the books, but nothing's going to accelerate your time like getting a coach or a mentor that's already doing the things that you want to do. And don't be if you can't get them on board for free, then pay them to do it. Make
Yeah.
sure you know what you're doing because a lot of people out there, call themselves coaches and they're not, they don't know what they're doing. So be careful. But if you find a good one, don't be afraid to pay money for that. It just blows my mind that, people pay 40, 50, $60,000 a year for a college education, but then for, a fourth of that, they could get direct hands-on mentorship from somebody that's already doing exactly what they want to do, and people don't want to do it. Don't be afraid to pay for speed. Don't be afraid to pay for help.
Yeah. Just check out in detail what the coach has done for, what exactly he's doing and what he has done for different people. And then,
Yeah,
yeah, of course, if it
for
fits
sure.
your plus, yeah. All right, Seth, it was a pleasure talking to you. And thanks a lot for all the details and information that you provided to our listeners.
Thanks, Ted. Really appreciate it, man.
Before that, I just missed one part. How can Decoding Cashflow listeners get in touch with you?
For sure, man. I usually update my links at sethpaulbradley.com. You can find all my social media links there. and you can find links to Tribevest and other things that I'm involved in if I'm raising capital for anything in particular. But that's the best place to find all my links. SethPaulBradley.com.
Awesome, man. All right. Thanks a lot for coming on the show, my friend.
All right, Ted. Appreciate it, man. Thanks.
All right. Take it. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Decoding Cash Flow, brought to you by Aster Capital. If you found value in this episode, then please share it with someone who you think could benefit from it. And make sure to act on what you've learned. If you want Ted Patel to personally help you reach your goals, then feel free to set up a one-on-one call with him. Also, visit us at astercapital.com for more free resources. Content of this podcast is for informational purposes only. As always, please consult your own advisor before making any investment decisions or setting a course of action. Thanks again for joining us on this episode of Decoding Cash Flow, and we'll catch you in the next episode.